Today's episode of the Energy Newsbeat podcast is brought to you by Enverus. The energy industry faces massive challenges every day, and the events over the last 2 years have caused huge disruptions like never before. Companies in the energy industry need actionable intelligence and a single source of truth that brings all the data together. Enverus is the energy specialized technology partner that provides intelligent connections for a global energy ecosystem. Only Enverus has the analytics, people, experience, and industry scope to connect the right data and information in the right way to discover missed opportunities and deliver fast outcomes. Find out more at Enverus.com. That's ENVERUS.com.
Hello, everybody. Today is another great day. My name's Stu Turlian, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group, and we're here for the Energy Newsbeat podcast. And I got a special guest for you guys today, Margaret Graham. She is the president of MPG Petroleum, and it's been around for 36 years. Welcome, Margaret. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stu. You don't have to emphasize the numbers, emphasize the name, and we're going to forget about,
Well, I said the company, Margaret. I just said the company's been around. So you're the one that brought that up. So I'm off the hook there.
I'm the founder of MPG Petroleum, and I was 27 years old when I founded MPG, thinking that, I knew more than I really did know, and that I could do as well as anybody that I was working for could. And, with all of the courage that someone in their 20s has, no fear. I guess that's really the very best time to start a company, because you're not really, you don't have enough sense to be afraid of failure.
There's a couple things that this sparks already our conversation rolling here. I'm going to have a little bit of a non-disclosure for our fans here, and that is, I've really enjoyed getting to meet you over the social media, LinkedIn, as well as having a couple conversations with you, and you're just a hoot. I absolutely love watching your conversations. You've been in the oil and gas space for a long time. You're a no-nonsense manager and owner, and I just really have enjoyed, and in fact, you were just on a rig trip. Can you tell us a little bit about that rig trip? You were out there, and I saw the video, the post out there. That's pretty darn cool. Tell us about that.
Well, the whole purpose of that trip last Wednesday was to visit Energy Drilling Company's rig number 16. Okay. I saw that rig right after it was refurbished a couple of years ago at a breakout party in Humble, Texas, and was very impressed with the rig. Our engineer, Les Skinner, was present at the breakout party, but we had never seen it in operation. And so I just happened to be speaking with a consultant friend of mine who indicated that he was doing a project on an energy drilling rig. And I said, "Oh, what rig number was that?" He said, "Number 16. I said, "Hey, that's my rig." So we would love to use that and think that we will for the upcoming Trinity prospect. And so nice. We got clearance by Energy Drilling, and also by the operator of the well that they were drilling for, and took some great drone footage. And we are now producing video for the header of MPG Petroleum's website to add a little pizzazz and interest, hopefully keep our visitors around for more than a few seconds.
Oh, how fun. Isn't that great? Because when you get to visit a rig, you really enjoy that from the standpoint that you like being in the field. I mean, that's your passion is talking oil, and you get out there and talk it.
Stu, the very first time I was sent on a well site, I was very young. I graduated college a little earlier than most, I guess.
Right.
And I started early and finished early. And so I was sent out on a well site by myself. I was 21 years old. I had never seen a well, and really had never driven very far outside of San Antonio alone. And I was given directions, and I found that well site, and immediately the sound and the sights and the smell, everything was just attractive to me, and I was into it. I didn't learn until somewhat later that my mother was calling my boss every day, asking him how I was, and complaining that I didn't call her, and that she was worried about me. And he said, Rosie, he said, don't worry about Margaret. He said, she's covering that well like a blanket.
Oh, how fun. But
That was that
you've
was Ernie
said,
Horton from Tesoro Petroleum, and I'll never
but
forget that comment.
you're an exception, because I'm going to be honest, there's not that many women that have been leaders in the industry as long as you've been out there, because it's not a women-led environment. How have you've had to buckle up and just pull your boots up and get after it, haven't you?
Well, I've been asked that question many times. What is it like to be a woman in a male-dominated oil and gas industry?
Right.
And because it's the only experience I have, it doesn't seem foreign to me.
Yeah.
It seems natural to me because that's all I've ever done. And I would say that probably maybe my progress is particularly on the large project that I've been aiming at getting put together and drilled for so long. Maybe it would happen quicker if I were a man. Maybe I would have access to funding that I am not accessing as easily. That perhaps may be true, but I try not to worry about those things. And I would say that my start in the business was being hired by men. Tom Cheney and Curtis Golson at Gulf Energy put me to work right out of college as a geological technician. It gave me my start in the business. And then later, Ernie Horton at Tesoro Petroleum hired me away from Gulf Energy as a junior geologist. And so really great, smart guys gave me my start. And they treated me just, I think, like they treated anybody else. And so I'm not complaining in the least bit. I love what I do.
I love your attitude. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that you and I just enjoy chit-chatting. And I was watching one of your other podcasts that you were on with Irina Slav.
Yeah.
She is such another neat lady that's a powerhouse in the energy thought leadership. You had a great interview with her.
She's awesome. I met her as like I met you through LinkedIn. So kudos to LinkedIn, because they are a great way of a great marketplace for meeting professional friends, actually. And Adina and I commented on a few of her articles because I was so impressed with the detail with which she writes and the clarity with which she writes. Every sentence packed with information. And I had to reach out to her and make a comment on her articles, and that's where we began a conversation. And then she invited me to do a podcast with her, which I really enjoyed doing, and I think it went very well also.
Oh, it was fun, and she is so funny. I mean, you guys really had a great chit chat back and forth on that. But Margaret, we're in a weird kind of situation right now in the energy crisis, and you've seen that change coming for a long time. That you've seen the industry as we got ready, that this is now a great time to invest, but we weren't always here. You lived through the ups and downs. What got us to this stage now where it's a good time to be in the oil and gas space?
Well, I experienced my first down cycle very early on in my career. It was probably one of the formative things that happened to me that set in my mind that I would one day work for myself, that I would not be sitting there waiting to be told one day that I'm being laid off. So I figured I'd make my own way, and if I failed, I failed, but at least it would be on my own horsepower. But so I've seen these cycles, no question about it. But the most recent down cycle really occurred beginning in 2015, and really a lot of that was about the success of the shale plays, where we began to export oil from the U.S. and had larger production than we have ever experienced in the United States. And so that began essentially what was a food fight between the United States and OPEC. So that OPEC said, well, if you're going to produce more, we're going to produce more. And before you know it, oil supply tanked the market. And then, we were just about to recover and come out of that situation. And then we get hit by COVID. So those have been, and of course, you know what happened in COVID. We actually went into negative territory due to the backup of the ship offloading ports there in California, and there was nowhere really we had Saudi oil sitting in offshore California waiting to come on shore in the US and nowhere to put it. And so that drove the market down, but we've recovered quite nicely. Last I checked, we're trading at almost $100 a barrel again for West Texas Intermediate. And I think close to $10 for MMBTU for natural gas. So I'd say that we're in an upcycle.
But and one of the things that I've enjoyed is one of the biggest problems that we've talked about before is the education of what the goodness of fossil fuels does. And you go out and you're a preacher for it. I mean, preach on, Margaret, because you go out there and you say, these are all the great things. Everything in your house is made with oil and gas. I mean, just you can't throw a rock around your house without hitting anything that's oil based.
Well, it is true that civilization as we know it in the 21st century is largely the result of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have created safety and in healthy living environments, and every necessity from electricity to heating and cooling to everything we have come to know and enjoy, and also for the largest part take for granted. So of necessity, I spend perhaps too much time talking to the subject, speaking to the subject on my website and in our conversations like this, because without the public's awareness of that you don't just flip a switch on your wall and magically have oil or I'm sorry, magically have electricity and light and heating. People don't understand where it really comes from. And about in excess of 80% of energy comes from oil and gas, and the balance 20% is made up of first nuclear, then wind and solar, and then maybe after that geothermal and hydroelectric power. So by far and large, oil and gas is carries the bulk of the energy grid, and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future, in my humble opinion.
Which is, I would happen to agree with you on that. But when you sit back and take a look at not the history of where we've been and the history of where we're going, I really appreciate the majors that have just gotten beat up by the Congress just recently. I mean, they were drug in there, and then President Biden said, threw them off to the Secretary of Energy, and then he met with the renewable folks. And in front of the Congress right before that, they said, are you going to drill more oil and not give any money back to the investors? And without a hitch, every one of the majors said, no, we're going to give money back to our investors. That's cool, because that commitment of giving money back to the investors, they're standing up instead of just saying okay to the president. They're taking care of their shareholders. And I respect that leadership on that.
Well, that's the difference between business and government. Business has to make profit in order to remain in existence, whereas the government just taxes you, at a higher percentage rate to make money, and without any care for how the money is spent. So yeah, I was rather proud of our CEOs from Major Oil standing up and also doing the right thing by their investors, returning dividends and buying back stock, gaining greater and greater control of their public companies. And it was the most important subject of the day. I was a little bit ashamed of Joe Biden for tossing them off to an undersecretary and instead talking to the green renewables folks that, they're popular, all right, but the whole thing, in my opinion, is a boondoggle and a big facade. And it actually creates, it is actually what is creating pain at the pump. It is creating the tight oil supply. funding that should be going into oil and gas projects are going into green renewable projects and ESG-based investments that will not return much of a profit and certainly take away from where money needs to be spent, particularly at this point in time when our strategic reserve has been whittled down by the president and used for purposes that it was never intended for.
Right. And I heard that I think 4 million barrels of it or something went to China.
More than that. I think closer to 5 million barrels
Right.
were sold to China. Guess what they're doing? They're building up their strategic reserve with our oil, and we are reducing ours at a time when they are threatening Taiwan, when they are threatening any other countries that if they get in their way, they've threatened Australia, they've threatened us. They're threatening anyone that stands in their way when and if they should decide to invade Taiwan, will be dealt with. I forget what Xi Jinping's words were, but it's something about like if you play with fire, you will get burned.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, I don't know how much more forthright and in your face you can be.
No. And what got me is, the conspiracy theory folks that were saying that 1 million barrels of that went to the same company that Hunter Biden is still on the board of for that Chinese oil company. And I'm like, okay, I believe that. I just wonder if the big guy got 10%.
Wouldn't surprise me a bit.
I don't know what to believe anymore. I think term limits of all politicians needs to be 15 minutes. I think that they all need to be thrown out. But
one day, Stu, I hope somebody in Hollywood will make a soap opera out of all of this, because I mean it couldn't be any more perfect. In terms of it's unbelievable, and just right out there in plain sight. And nobody is saying a word.
No. Now, Margaret, changing the subject to something that I know you and I like, and that's oil and investing. I get to visit with a lot of investors across the U.S. and actually quite honestly in the EU as well. And when we sit back and take a look at the different places, Texas is booming. And I'm going to tee this up for a little conversation here, but I love Texas. Texas is just, Texas is cool. Sorry, I got Texas license plates and all that kind of good stuff. But when you sit back and take a look at California, a U-Haul trailer coming from California to Texas is a couple $1,000s. Going from Texas to California, it's like free, or they'll even pay you. Nobody's going from Texas to California.
Yeah, they'll pay you to return their trucks to them because they're all going in one direction.
Oh, yeah.
People can't get out of there quickly enough because of the way the state government is run.
And there's a couple of reasons why. And I want to go over this with you because I think you and I just before the show chatted about this a little bit. And that is in California, you have to make a lot of money just to survive. And so in this, I went through the exercise on these numbers. If you make $1,500,000 in California, which is middle class, you have to have that just for a house. I'm kidding, of course, but your federal tax on that would be $513,000. Your state tax would be $184,000. Your Social Security is $9,114. Your Medicare is $33,000. Your state disability is $1,600. Your total tax on $1.5 million. Are you ready? You got a drum roll? Okay. $741,886. So
50% of your income.
49.5. Go. Holy.
Close enough.
And the number one thing that alternative investor folks are asking me about is what's tax deductible. And Margaret, when you're dealing with your fund, what is tax deductible?
Well, one of the most favorable tax incentives for oil and gas investment are the intangible drilling cost write-offs, which comprise a majority of the cost to drill and complete a well. So intangibles are all goods and services that once utilized are spent. In other words, they have no salvage value. And
Right.
they can comprise anywhere from 65 to 85% of a given project cost.
Right.
And so that is 100% deductible in the year incurred.
Right.
The balance of the project cost, the tangible portion of it,
Right.
can be amortized, and the tangibles are for tangible equipment, things that have a useful value and could be salvaged and resold. And so those are amortized over the course of the useful life of the equipment. And so eventually that the balance of the cost of a given project is also tax deductible. Now, I skipped over a little bit the other things that are capitalized, like your land bases, and now we have to capitalize some of our geophysical bases. So you would probably throw those into the tangible category to a certain extent. And so that's why I say 65 to 85%. It all depends on how big your land position is, what your geophysical cost is that would dictate how that all shakes out. But at any rate, all of it is eventually tax deductible. Now, here's the other kicker.
Okay.
As a small independent producer, if you have less than 6,000 barrels of oil a day, say as an individual investor, if you don't have more than 6,000 barrels a day, then you are entitled to the small producers depletion allowance.
Oh, cool.
Minimum 15% of your income is tax-free, minimum, because that's considered given depletion of the asset. Now, if you can show that the decline curve on your production is more than 15%, then you are entitled to that amount of your income not being taxed. So this is probably one of the best kept secrets in investments that the government wrote this tax law in 1985, I believe, and that was to encourage private investment into the oil and gas sector, because the government recognized how very important it is to develop our fossil fuels, natural resources.
So on your big fund that you're working on right now, if somebody were to invest in your, is it a single well bore lease? I mean, investment?
It depends on the project that you're speaking of. If you're speaking of the Trinity, it starts off with a one well commitment. If you're speaking of the Pearl, which is really more like a portfolio of prospects, now we're talking about a 4 well commitment. Okay,
got it. So when you're taking a look at the different aspects of those as an investment, you have the layer for tax deduction, but you also have passive income.
Yes. Actually, because the way if a project is structured properly as a joint venture rather than as a limited partnership, it really isn't passive income in terms of tax. If you're talking in terms of taxes, having an operating agreement and being capable of making decisions along with the operator, in other words, certain elections that one would make along the way as to either setting pipe or not setting pipe, as to drilling a development well or not, that really removes you from the passive status into the active status, which is what allows the pass through of the intangible drilling cost deductions and so on.
And so if somebody's really wanting to get involved and understand and be an oil kind of guy, that would be the way to go then. Is that what I just heard?
A joint venture structure is much more favorable tax-wise. Now, some people may shy away from it because they're concerned of possible liability. So if they are a co-tenant in the oil and gas lease in a joint venture property, a joint venture partner, they may be concerned that an issue that could occur on the well site might then attach
Right.
to them personally. So I always advise that the best thing to do is to make your investment through an LLC to protect your personal assets, and to put just the amount of funds in the LLC that are necessary for your investment, your current planned investment. And then in addition to that, when we are securing general liability policy along with blowout insurance and various other kinds of insurance for a given project, we also will name the investors as co-insured.
Oh, nice.
So that also then provides them the same insurance that the operator MPG Petroleum would enjoy through the policy.
Well, that's pretty darn cool, because the way that is structured, your tax deduction really piles on up in there in that given year. And as these two different projects come up and start rolling, this is really what a great time to be at the forefront of these projects.
Absolutely. In fact, the two projects are somewhat interrelated. The Trinity prospect was really pulled out of the Pearl portfolio, sort of a cherry on top of the portfolio to be offered as an entry kind of project, in order to reduce the cost and to soften the risk of the Pearl, which is a much larger investment. It's a $52.5 million project, and we are due right now to update the AFE budgets on the former drilling wells. But we have recently updated the AFE on the Trinity prospect, and so that's about a $7.7 million project. So you can see the difference in size is quite large. And so we even, for certain parties that have the financial capability and the interest in doing so, offer an option so that they can be in the Trinity, see the result of the well, and then exercise the option or not on the larger project. So that's another structure that we are offering to have something for everybody. The Trinity is maybe for a more modest stakeholder. The Pearl is for certainly a much larger stakeholder, or we can hybrid it in the middle to allow a smaller investor possibly to leverage their investment in the Trinity in order to be able to afford an interest in the Pearl. And there's no rules as far as, say, for instance, if an investor bought 5 or 10% of the Trinity, there's nothing that says that you must exercise an option on the same amount of interest. It can be up to that amount of interest or less. So there's no, there are rules only at the top. There's no rules in terms of reducing the amount of interest to be exercised.
And I just want to make sure I keep my producer happy here. He's probably kicking me here and saying, we do not offer financial advice. Please speak with your CPA and then call Margaret.
And the same goes for me. I will say that I am speaking based on, I'm a geologist and first and foremost, but I've been doing it long enough that I understand a little bit about the tax consequences and how to structure something to make it the most beneficial. But then we also have at the ready our oil and gas accountant, who is CPA and also certified in oil and gas tax accounting.
That's critical to have good people and good resources.
Well, at the beginning of a project, of course, we're estimating through the AFE, or authorization for expenditure, the cost of the drilling and completion of a well. But once the well is drilled and completed, we then make a statement of actual cost. So that then gets divided into tangible and intangible cost, and a statement is produced by the accountant to go to the investors to help them in their tax preparation, so that they have some basis and all of how to take their deduction.
This is cool. Now, the geological structure on your, because you can sit down and you have the expertise that a lot of oil folks don't have from the standpoint of being a geologist and being able to recognize a deal.
Well, you know, having a nose for a prospect is a much more important skill, and maybe it's not even a skill, maybe it's an instinct, than
Right.
really being a good map maker. I have met many geologists over the years that are, that are good at the perfunctory task of making cross sections and
Right.
producing structure maps and totaling production history and
Right.
those sorts of things. But that in and of itself is not how you find oil and gas. What
Right.
you're really doing is summarizing something that other people have already done. So the idea of finding new reserves for oil and gas really requires an eye and
Right.
a sense of what makes sense of something that is disruptive or abnormal to the lay of the land from a
Right.
geological perspective. It takes a disruption of the normal attitude of the
Right.
strata and structures that are present in order to trap oil and gas. And so one has to have an eye for that. And then once you see something, then you have to have the guts to do something about it.
Right.
I'll give you an example. When Spindletop was drilled,
Right.
I think it was on the third well that finally was a success. The first two were near misses, but the
Right.
perseverance was there. I believe Dad Joyner was the discovering oil man. I don't think he was a geologist, but he had a lot of guts.
Right.
And when Spindletop blew in, there were hundreds of Model T Ford pickup trucks all pointed towards the wooden derrick, everybody watching this oil
Right.
blow up into the air and rain down everywhere. And while everybody was oohing and awing, there was one guy that got really busy about doing something about it, and that
Right.
was H.L. Hunt. H.L.
Oh,
Hunt, instead of standing there, Googling, oohing and awing at it, he
right.
instead went around, start knocking on doors and taking oil and gas leases. So he saw the
Oh,
opportunity and he did something about it. And his presence there was kind of as a card sharp, hanging out in the oil field camps, hustling the roughnecks out of their paychecks. That's what he was doing there. But he was smart, and he saw the opportunity and he got about doing something about it. And that's what made H.L. Hunt who H.L. Hunt became. Uh,
wow.
Four
Did
different
not
Hunt.
know that.
Yes. Yeah. There's Hunt Exploration, Petro Hunt, Hunt Oil Company, and some other Hunt entity. I think there was four.
Right. Well,
All
Margaret,
by HL.
you you had it when you got out of college early. You got the bug. You got into it. What advice or how can we attract young people or young women to come into the next generation? Because we're losing a lot of folks that are retiring. And what would you say to the young people to get them into this industry? Because it's going to be around a while.
Well, that is one of the largest problems that we face in the industry, Stu. You hit the nail on the head.
Right.
We are short on personnel, and our graduation levels in geology and engineering departments is pretty low.
Right.
And this always happens after a down cycle. But then it picks up after they see oil prices recovering nicely.
Right.
Here's the main reason the main encouragement that I would give, and it's the reason that encouraged me to go into oil and gas. As a
Right.
geologist, I could have done many things. I could have gone into minerals, I could have
Right.
gone into water, I could have gone into my first love, which is volcanology, the study of volcanoes. But what attracted me to oil and gas was the income potential.
Ah,
Right now, new students are graduating in excess of $100,000 a year with no experience, only a sheepskin. And especially if you're going to work for the larger companies, the majors,
wow.
might be north of 100,000 a year. For
Right.
somebody that really doesn't have any experience or knowledge of what to do, they're just ready to be trained. And I don't know of too many industries other than maybe a lawyer or a doctor. And
Right.
not even lawyers make that kind of money. I don't think there's just too many of them. And unfortunately, but
Yeah.
because the market is tight, oil companies are willing to pay very handsomely for beginning level geologists and
Right.
engineers, and then train them up. So if you want to make money, if you want an exciting career, if you're
Right.
tough enough to hang in through the good times and the bad times, in other words, I think it's good advice to always keep a small footprint. Don't spend every dime you make. Don't buy a big fancy house and expensive cars and boats. I mean, keep a modest footprint and put your money in the bank so that you can weather through the downturns when they happen, and inevitably they do happen.
Right. And they will. Yeah. All right, here we are. We're running out of time. Mr. Producer's kicking me under the table here. Give us your last thoughts. The last words are yours, Margaret.
Well, I would just like to say that there has been no better time in history to get involved in oil and gas as an investor.
Right.
Oil approaching $100 a barrel, natural gas approaching $10 per MMBTU. All of the beneficial tax benefits are in place. And from the aspect that we have a tight oil supply, which is probably not going to change because of the green renewables movement and the money that's being deprived of the oil and gas industry and put into those projects, we're going to continue to see a tight oil market, which will create sustained and increasing oil and gas prices. So I think we can look forward to that. And also then there's an aspect of spending your money where it counts. Do you know, we are, between us and them is really just the readily available fuel that we as a country are capable of producing. But if we don't get busy about the business of drilling for new oil and gas reserves, we may find ourselves in a very bad position against China. And I think it's a patriotic thing to do. It's a very lucrative thing to do. And of course, there's risk. If anything is profitable as oil and gas, of course, there's potential risk, but that's what the tax benefits are for. Because in the event of a dry hole, 100% of the investment is deductible in the year incurred. So I don't see how you can lose.
No, I don't need it. Margaret, thank you for stopping by the podcast today. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you, Stu. I enjoyed it.